to see what the vision for cultural policy for the future should be. And what we developed in this past year was the sector blueprint, which was more or less a shadow culture compass. We said, okay, we hear at some point in the future a culture compass will be developed by the European Commission to kind of outline what the policies will be. If it were in our hands to write that, what would it look like? And that was a really in-depth collaborative process with over 30 cultural networks who wrote individual policy briefs. We have 10 chapters from working conditions to digital, to sustainability, to health and well-being, that really brings in research and recommendations for how we should move forward. This was quite the task, of course, because again, we're bringing in completely different voices from across the sector to develop something that can now be used to also compare based on what the sector is really saying and experiencing and working on. Do we see that reflected in the proposed policies of the Culture Compass? In many cases, there is a lot of complementary actions proposed there, which shows that advocacy does work. It works to collaborate and bring people together and to put in that effort to find what the meeting place is and to create something that can also be shared. So this shadow document, this sector blueprint is also a living tool. It's full of recommendations, it's full of resources, it's full of outlines that can be used at regional, national, and local levels.
And evidently, if I mean, what seems to be really coming out is the element of collectivity, the importance of unity, of coming together. And as Adrian also mentioned, that we have the creatives and then the policymakers trying to come together in understanding one another, because of course different backgrounds, different ways of perhaps thinking, but it's so important to come together and to be collective in the voice and in the understanding. And as we speak of collectivity, I have to turn to you, Matthew, Solidarieta, because I know that is your ethos, that is the realm that you work with. So Matthew, this question is to you. How do you believe artists and cultural workers and unions can coordinate their efforts to build stronger advocacy networks? And how might accessibility, representation, and fair working conditions reinforce each other in that process?
For me, one of the things I believe, especially in Malta, it is, since we are so small, there is that advantage, let's call it that, where we know each other, and it's easier in that way to have that, bring everyone together, not maybe in a policy-wise, because obviously there might be some disagreements, but in at least
accessibility.
Exactly. And when some of our members wanted to start a section for the creative industry, one of our first things was we do not want to fragment it, right? It is very important to stay unified, as you said, because as Howard very perfectly said, even myself, I do not come from a background of a creative industry. I cannot advocate on behalf of my members because I do not know what they're going through. I have not experienced it. So my role is building the structure for these people to speak out, but speak out on a collective level, and then, yes, do it with the organizations that are already doing this kind of work as well. From the union perspective, obviously, we will focus on the fair pay, on the organizing, on the working aspect, but the policy change, the advocacy part of it has to remain crucial, and that is where the coordination, I think, lies in sync. The challenge then becomes on, yes, the union as a union will focus on the policy and the work aspect, but that cannot grow if the collective and creative economy is not also improving. And that is where the understanding, and I find it a bit easier than our work on other sections, because on other sections, for example, we are very involved in housing and tenancies. Whatever I'm advocating for, I know there are other people with a lot more money advocating completely the opposite, right? So we need to take on a different approach. When it comes to this, I feel, when this sector, I'm feeling, and we're seeing that there is that want and there is that need that we present a collective voice. And that already helps a lot more, because then going in front of the policymakers with a unified vision, then as Adrian said perfectly, it's just converging the policy goals and our ideas into one. And having both all the workers and producers and everyone on board already makes it much easier to then achieve that result.
And also the approach, as Howard as well mentioned so well, is how we go to the policymakers. And this is something that, as MEIA, we believe is very, very important. Even if we are criticizing, but we criticize constructively and we bring to the table what we believe can be done. Because it's useless we criticize without any solution, or at least an idea how we can get to that solution. And Matthew, you spoke about accessibility, and with accessibility in mind, I would like to ask a question to Angela Bettoni. So, when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, Angela, how can advocacy ensure these are understood not as separate issues, but as essential elements for cultural participation and policy change?
I mean, in my opinion, it's really about going to the place of institution themselves and start talking to them, like what can we do to make it more open? How can we create safe spaces where every voice is heard? How can we find and create alternatives if you're able to speak for yourself, for example? So it's looking at the people inside and telling them, look, these spaces were not created with these people in mind. How can we open up to let the other people who have, let's say, disabilities come into your spaces and thrive? Or that can only happen if they think of access. I mean, it takes a village to raise a child, and but they have to think about creating spaces and willing to adapt of how they've been running the place of institution to make it more broad, more open. I mean, you can't have only one person approaching you and say, hey, I want this, this, and this. The idea is to look at what is happening right here. There's some people who can, some people who can't. How about we listen to what they need, give them support when it's needed? I mean, inclusion is not partial. It has to be full. But how to achieve that is to do it through the autistic community, because it's the one way the individual is able to thrive through having the right support. And nothing is as better as the arts to come, talk, signs, and find alternative ways of sharing your voice. But what I'm trying to say is that it has to start from the place of power, actually, because there must be a hierarchy system, but they have to adapt how they establishing the rules to like, okay, I accept. A different part of learning, we have to open that. And this is as better as the arts to find our space, to give the right support, right resources, the right and accurate information to carers, guardians, and families. So at least the individual has a chance to at least have an outlet, and also to make sure they have the support from the autistic community first and foremost, because like that, once they hear the voices, they know, okay, I'm bringing you into our space, and here's how we're going to work. But if the shift has to be made to provide very equitable roles, and also access is not an afterthought, access to be architecture.
Of course. Thank you for your intervention.
Woohoo!
Very last question. I don't know if anyone from the audience would like to make an intervention. Please, really do feel free. Just let us know, and we would really love to hear from you. And if you'd rather discuss afterwards, maybe you feel more comfortable, please just reach out to us and we'll be here for an open discussion. I have one very last question. We have about 3 minutes to go. And I'm going to ask this question to whoever wishes to answer it. What do you feel systemic change means for such a small ecosystem, for such a small cultural ecosystem like Malta's? Anyone? I'm going to leave the... Yes, Adrian?
My view on systemic change in our context, the blue sky scenario would be that the cultural element, at least the one pertaining to creatives, artistic practitioners, and everyone within the ecosystem, the impacts of any policy, not just cultural policy, as we understand it on an everyday level, that they are considered. So if it's a planning policy, if it's an education policy, if it's a health policy, social policy, fiscal policy, all of those areas, in some way or another, consider the cultural element in some way or another. Because in the end, it is evident that most the policies that affect the creative industries the most, the cultural sector the most, are the policies that most of the time come from outside of the cultural policy realm. So if it's taxation, it's within the Ministry of Finance remit. If it's something related to social security, it's within the social services remit. Especially when we talk about fair practice, working conditions and precarity. So the ideal scenario, systemically, would be that, in my opinion.
Thank you all for your very insightful interventions. I really hope that we can take these on and learn how we can do better and be better for the creative industry at large. I think you make very important points when it comes to professionalization, when it comes to unity, when it comes to reducing fragmentation. So as MEIA, we are definitely going to continue to be open to learning and to, after all, implementing, because that is the need that we need to implement and we need to continue driving the sector forward. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you all. I will now leave the floor to Antonella. Thank you.
My intervention is going to be very brief. First of all, I think I'd like to give us a round of applause to our panel, and also to Marilena. Thank you, Marilena. We're going to have a coffee break right now. You can make your way to the back, and we'll be calling you back shortly. So have a nice break, and we'll